Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the November 15th meeting of the Fiscal Management Committee. We have a quite packed agenda. And before we get started, I just want to do a quick public service announcement about COVID. Our case numbers are relatively high. Our positivity rates are low. We're moving into the holiday season, so I encourage everybody to be safe. And if you need a booster, they are widely available in the county. In fact, those of you who work at Carver, you can walk right across the street to Montgomery College on Wednesday and get your booster. You can get, if you're being cautious as you engage with family over the holidays, you can get a COVID test at Montgomery College 7 days a week. So that's my public service announcement. And then just a little bit of an appreciation since I took over as chair of this committee not quite a year ago. I have so appreciated all of the support and all of the intellectual energy this group brings to this work. Some of it is, is work that we have to do every year, and some of that we're going to be digging into today. And there's also been an opportunity for us to adapt our agenda to emerging opportunities and to emerging changes and evolving changes in the education funding landscape in the state. And so 2 of our agenda items today reflect both of those things as we've added a standing agenda item for sustainability, and we've added, which has been ongoing. And this is our first meeting where we've added an agenda item for Maryland Blueprint and the Blueprint's Accountability and Implementation Board. So with that, I will let those of us who are here introduce themselves. My name is Lynn Harris. I chair this committee, and I will turn it first to Dr. Daka.
Judy Daka, good morning.
And Dr. Dawson.
Good morning, Jeannie Dawson, Chief of Finance and Operations. Great to see everyone.
And Mr. Riley, I will let you kick off with all of your staff.
Good morning, Rob Riley, Associate Superintendent of Finance, and I'd like to pass it off to Dan Kelly.
Good morning, Dan Kelly, Director, Division of Financial Services.
And Phoebe.
Good morning, everyone. Phoebe Kwan, Director of Investments.
And Tom.
Morning, Tom Clausing. I am the associate to Rob Riley.
And then we also have Janine. Do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Good morning, Janine Backey. I'm the new implementation coordinator for Maryland's Blueprint for the Future. Good morning, everyone.
And Yvonne. Oh, you're on mute, Yvonne.
Sorry, good morning. My name is Yvonne Alfonso Windsor, and I'm the supervisor of the budget unit.
And then we have operations staff here as well, too. Seth, you want to kick that off?
Yes, good morning. Seth Adams, Director, Department of Facilities Management. I'll pass it over to Lynn.
Good morning, I'm Lynn Sadate, the Director of Sustainability and Compliance for MCPS.
And Lynn, we also have we might as well introduce them now as well, too. We have our partners from Clifton, from CLA. Bill, you want to start those introductions?
Sure, thanks, Rob. Bill Early, principal with CLA. I was in charge of overseeing the external audit for MCPS this year. Jonathan?
Good morning, my name is Jonathan Griffin. I am the manager on this engagement. I was responsible for more of the day-to-day communications.
Okay, and Ms. Bergstresser.
Hi, MJ Bergstresser, Supervisor of the Internal Audit Unit.
And Mr. Patel. Is he there?
Drew, are you available?
Rob, I know he was at a client. He may be in listen-only mode.
Okay.
As an audience member.
Oh, really?
And Ms. Webb.
Good morning, Lori Christina Webb. I'm Chief of Staff to the board.
Okay, and so this is all of us, and we will just jump right into the meeting. First of all, any concerns with the informational summary from our last meeting on September 21st?
No.
Then I'm just going to jump right into item 3.1, which is our year-end financial report, and I will turn that over to Dr. Dawson and Mr. Riley.
Great. Thank you so much. We've got a few items on the agenda this morning that we're going to start with this presentation on the audit of our June 30th financial results. So our staff will go over the process of how we created the statements. Then our external audit team from CLA will provide you with mandated communications, the results of the audit, most important thing. And before we get started, I do want to provide Rob an opportunity to speak a few things up front. So Rob?
Morning, everyone. So I just wanted to introduce our new Director of Financial Services, although he introduced himself already, but I just wanted to give him some credit because this year, in addition to still dealing with the repercussions of COVID, we had new staff members, we had a new financial system, and we had a new GASB pronouncement too. So a lot of different factors playing into having us to meet our 6:30 deadline or 9:30 deadline and do well in our audit. So I'm going to kick it off to Dan, but I just want to say kudos for a job well done.
Thank you, Rob. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to overview the year-end financial report, the reporting process, and how it relates to the external audit. So according to the state law, the board is required to submit an annual financial report within 90 days after the fiscal year end. So the report is due to the state by September 30th each year. This report, previously known as the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, is now known as the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or ACFR, as we like to call it. It is about a 140-page report made up of about 20 statements, about 50 additional schedules, the management discussion and analysis, and the footnotes. The report covers the financial data of our 10 funds, the primary fund being our general fund, but we also have 2 other governmental funds, 1 internal service fund, 4 enterprise funds, and 2 fiduciary funds. Previously, we had 11 funds with 3 fiduciary funds. However, this year we implemented a new GASB standard, GASB 84, which clarifies the reporting over fiduciary funds and actually moved our student activity fund into the general fund. So this was brought up in previous meetings, and I'm sure Bill will talk about this more in his presentation as well. Along with the hurdle of implementing GASB 84, we were also working to implement a new cloud accounting software, as Rob had mentioned. There was certainly some troubleshooting this year with running new reports and getting through our year-end close. However, this new software is kind of a good step for the future to make things more efficient in the long run. As you can tell, the ACFR and related audit is a big endeavor. There's about 50 people across several teams in accounting, finance, budget, investments, payroll, HR, procurement, construction, internal audit, and others. So mouthful there. Yeah, a lot of people working on this project to help get this done. And that's not even to mention the help from Bill's team at Clifton Larson Allen. So definitely want to thank everyone who helped on this major project and enabled us to meet our deadline. So the auditors worked with us for a couple weeks in the early summer to begin testing our controls, and then spend about 6 to 8 weeks working with us in August and September to audit our financial statements, the underlying data, and complete the test of the related internal controls. So we choose to look at this audit process as an opportunity. We can always continue to be mindful, looking for improvements both within our internal controls and within our reporting process. So next year we will have some gained efficiencies through these improvements, but we also have a new challenge of implementing GASB 87. So this is a new standard to improve the accounting for leases, and will move leases onto the balance sheet. And I'm assuming Bill will go into that as well with his presentation. So before I steal any more of his thunder, are there any questions before we pass it off to CLA?
No.
Dr. Daka, do you have any questions?
No, I do not.
Yeah, no, I think I'll hold mine until we get a little more into the, drill down a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dan. Dan, was somebody sharing it, or do you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, I guess you can share your screen.
Oh, somebody has it. Somebody already did.
Sorry.
So, yeah, so that was a very high level introduction that Dan gave. We'll go into a little bit more detail. Obviously, we won't go into every number. We'd have to spend much more than just a few minutes with you at that point. But if we can go.
Bill, I think you just went on mute.
Oh, am I back now?
Yes, you are.
I
And
think that was me.
all you have to do is say next slide, okay?
Okay. So we're going to go over the financial statement results, the audit services performed, required communications with those charged with governance, which is you all as the committee. Our audit approach summary, we will talk about a little bit about 87 and then open up for any questions. So next slide. So as Dan said, the financial statements, they are responsible as management for putting together the financial statements. We actually only audit them. So they actually prepare everything except for the audit opinion, which is 3 pages within the report. The report is very lengthy, takes weeks for Dan's team to put it together. I will say that if you don't get a chance to read the entire report, take a second, excuse me, and read the management discussion analysis, which is found on pages 17 to 30. It provides a very high level analytical of comparison from last year to this year. So that is, again, it's a little easier sometimes to read 13 pages and get a high level summary than to try to read all 100 and some pages of the report. That can get into very technical details, especially on the pension and OPEB financial reporting. A few financial highlights. Total net position was $223.2 million. Unrestricted net position was a deficit of $3,106 million, and there was a decrease in net position of $55.5 million. Next slide. The governmental fund is, as Dan said, is the primary fund of the financial statement. So, or that'd be the general fund. But overall, in your governmental funds, you had a total fund balance of $94.4 million, total unassigned fund balance of 6.3, a change in fund balance of 12.1, and the fund balance detail can be found on page 66 of the financial report. For the general fund, which is the primary fund of MCPS, total fund balance for that was $93.9 million. Total unassigned fund balance was 6.3, and there was a change in fund balance of $12 million for the year. Revenues were $2.8 billion. Other financing sources were $19.8 billion, and expenditures of $2.87 billion. So I'm sure some of those numbers are familiar. As you know, you're $1 billion school district when you do your budget. So we do look at budget to actual as well. Next slide. So here is your non-GAAP budgetary basis, as I was starting to mention. And this is what you actually use to manage on a day-to-day basis would be your non-GAAP budgetary. Revenues were $165.2 million below budget. However, that was offset by strong management of expenditures, and expenses were $191.5 below budget. So while your revenue did not come in where you thought, you did an excellent job of managing the budget to make sure that you maintain your expenditures within line with the revenues that you did receive. Ending budgetary basis fund balance, excuse me, was 6.3. Budgetary expenditures over revenues was 30.1 compared to a budgeted decrease of 56.4. The budget actual schedule was actually found on page 40 of the annual comprehensive financial report. And per MSD requirements, there was no negative expenditure variances in any of the 13 categories that were presented in the financial statements. Next slide. As I did mention, we do audit the financial statements. So they are in accordance with government auditing standards for this 6/30 year end of June 30th, 2021. We perform limited procedures to the required supplementary and the supplementary information found in the financial statements. We are still in process of finishing up what is known as the federal single audit, which is the audit of the federal schedule of federal expenditures of federal awards. Again, that is due, as of now, it's due 12/31. The feds have extended it. However, MSD has not. We're waiting to see if they do, but that audit is in process. Next slide. Here's the reports we issued. We issued our independent auditors report, which is found in the annual comprehensive financial report. We actually also issue a report on internal controls over compliance. We will be issuing a report on each major federal program as part of our single audit report. And then we issue our governance communication, which is our SAS 114 letter, which is sent to you all as those charged with governance of the school board. And we're going to walk through exactly what that letter said. And I'm sure to do that, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan. Next slide.
All right, thank you, Bill. I'm just going to briefly touch on the results of our audit procedures. First off, we have performed our audit in accordance with the generally accepted auditing standards. The purpose of the audit is threefold. The first is to obtain reasonable assurance whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. And I want to emphasize that that is reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance, because cost benefit does not allow for absolute assurance. The second is to assess accounting principles and the estimates used by management to make sure that they're appropriate. And then thirdly, to evaluate the overall financial statement presentation and the appropriateness thereof. Next slide, please. Our independent auditor's report has indicated an unmodified opinion for FY21. This means that the statements met the requirements demanded by our regulations and were prepared in accordance with applicable accounting principles, criteria, and standards. The date of our report was September 30th, 2021. Our independent auditor's report on internal control reported no material weaknesses and no significant deficiencies, which is a good thing. Also, our management letter did not require any communications with management, and that is also a good thing. Next slide, please. Like Bill mentioned, as of right now, the single audit of federal programs is due as of December 31st, pending any communications from Department of Education. Montgomery Schools is a low-risk auditing, which means that we have to get coverage of 20%, which is required. There are 4 major programs that are selected for testing this year. Title I, which deals with funds to improve teaching and learning in high-poverty schools. Title II, which deals with supporting effective instruction. The COVID Relief Fund, which is pretty self-explanatory. And the Education Stabilization Grant, which is also actually related to COVID-19 for the purpose of preventing, preparing for, and responding to all complications and challenges related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. So during the audit process, the scope and timing of the audit proceeded as planned. There were no significant hitches or delays. The significant accounting policies of Montgomery County Public Schools can be found in Note 1 of the financial statements. And we can attest here that they are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and consistent with industry practices and standards. Also, as Dan mentioned earlier, there was a new GASB implementation this year for GASB 84, which is described in Note 1L of the financial statements. And due to the implementation, there was a restatement related to reclassifying school activities into the general fund, and the beginning net position was restated to reflect that reclassification. Next slide, please. So this year, there was no uncorrected or corrected adjustments, no difficulties encountered in performing the audit. No disagreements with Dan, Rob, or anyone else in the management team, thankfully. No issues discussed prior to our selection and engagement as the independent auditors. No issues related to the group audit. And as far as we are concerned, and to our knowledge, management did not consult with other accountants on the application of generally accepted accounting principles or government accounting standards board pronouncements. Next slide, please. So just want to briefly touch on the significant estimates used by management within the financial statements. The first is depreciation, is mostly due to the estimate of the useful lives of fixed assets. The next three, net pension liability, net OPEB liability, and self-insurance and the related IBNR. Actuaries develop and estimate those liabilities, and management relies on the estimates that were prepared by the actuary, and we deem those reasonable for the current year. Next slide, please. So when we are developing and designing our audit procedures, the first thing that we do is perform a risk assessment. And based on the risk assessment, we develop our audit procedures to address risk related to higher risk audit areas. We identified higher risk audit areas, which are noted here: revenue recognition, payables, accruals, other liabilities, payroll expenditures and related liabilities, including pension and OPEB, non-payroll expenditures, information technology, the general control environment related to information technology, grant compliance, and financial statement disclosures. And with that, next slide, please. I will thank you for your time, and I will turn it back over to Bill to discuss GASB 87, which is a new pronouncement applicable to the upcoming audit year.
Yeah, so as Jonathan mentioned, we implemented 84 this year, and the implementation of these GASBs is not optional. You're required to do it as you have to follow government accounting standards. So 84 was this year, which moved your school activity funds into the general fund for financial reporting purposes only. I want to be clear that that was for financial reporting purposes only. You still do maintain separate accounts for the schools, and they're still responsible for overseeing that. And Mary's group still goes through and does work around those student activity funds. 87 will be a very big one. Right now you do have some leases that are called capital leases that are on your financial statements. However, this is going to be for any operating leases. You're going to have to look at all leases, but the main change is going to be for any operating leases or any leases that you currently do not actually report on your financial statements. So if you're leasing a building as office space, right now that's considered an operating lease. That is now going to become a lease that is going to actually show on the financial statements as a liability. So we're going to be working with all the school districts we audit, especially with MCPS over the next 9 months to kind of really get this going and get this ready to be reporting the financial statements for next year. But it is a large one that's going to require significant amount of time and calculation, gathering all the leases from all the departments. It's going to be outside of just the finance department. They're going to have to go and gather any leases, work with transportation, any of the schools that have leases for vending, et cetera. So it's a big one. It's going to require outside the finance department and cooperation with all departments, but it is something Dan and Rob have been attending trainings on. They're aware of. We're going to have some additional trainings, and we'll be working closely with them over the next couple months to get this thing implemented. With that, next slide, we will answer any questions.
Naka, any questions on your end? So I would just ask, first of all, Dan, at the very beginning, you were talking about several comments of the auditing process, which included testing internal controls. So could you give just a little overview about what that actually means for our operations and how that was done?
Yes, so internal controls are kind of our checks and balances within our system. So it's kind of making sure that the proper people are signing checks, that pay rates are authorized properly and calculated properly. So Jonathan and Bill and that team would select a sample from our population of transactions for payroll and disbursements. There's other areas as well that they'll select from, and they'll just review all of those transactions to make sure that the approvals are proper and that the transaction was processed properly.
And that's just a random selection.
I don't think I can speak to that.
So Lynn, I can comment on that. And in addition to just disbursements, there's also, cash reconciliations, make sure they're being prepared and approved timely. As far as the sample selection is related, we actually have a data analysis software. And so for payroll disbursements or non-payroll disbursements, we'll import that into our data analysis software, and it will select unusual or high-risk transactions based on trends, descriptions, materiality thresholds, debit entries to credit accounts, things of that nature. So it's not random. There is some thought and trend analysis that goes into that sample selection.
Thank you. And then I think, Mr. Early, this question would go to you. So you're talking about the GASB 87, new requirement that will affect next year's audit process, and it relates to leases. And I guess for the uninitiated or non-experts in this area like me, you think leases of property or equipment. But so what kind of leases are we actually talking about? Because you have alluded to this being quite a big area of work.
Yeah, it is, because some of the leases you may have may not be maybe things that are not seen as actual full leases, such as transportation. You have bus contractors that you may use that there may be an embedded lease piece in there. So that's what we'll need to look at. But it does cover your general ones that you're thinking of, right? Like a copier lease. So you can imagine how many copier leases and little leases that a school system your size has. As well as if there's any, if you have any cell towers on school properties, those all those leases have to go in through. So it's not so much that the types of leases, it's the volume of leases that you may have. And then trying to break them apart between what's the service piece and what's the lease piece. That could also be a challenge.
And could you just give just a quick couple of sentences on the rationale of why GASB is adding this piece?
Yeah, essentially it's very easy. FASB put it in for the private sector reporting world, for the business world. And typically anytime they do a large change in accounting principles, that GASB takes a look at, should they be doing it? And they took a look at this one and then said, yeah, for financial reporting purposes, we think everybody should be doing this across the government world as much as the private sector world. So they typically follow the FASB world, and in this case, they absolutely did.
Okay. I don't have any other questions right now, Dr. Daka. Anything come to you as they were speaking?
No, thank you.
Okay. So I will turn it back over to, who am I turning it over to? Mr. Riley, Dr. Dawson.
Yes. Okay. So with that, are we moving on to 4? Okay. So in hearing the audit of the year-end financial statements and various funds, one of the largest of these funds that we have currently, of course, is our pension fund. So we have staff here today that's going to provide you an update on where we stand in this fund, and then our actuaries from GRS will walk you through the process of how they're going to determine, or how they've determined our actuarial liability and the implications that will have on our budget. So at this point, I will turn it back over to Rob Riley, Associate Superintendent of Finance.
Thanks, Jeannie. And I see that our GRS folks have joined us. So Amy, I'm going to turn it to you. If you could just introduce yourself and the rest of the GRS team, and then we'll kick it back to our pension presentation.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Amy Williams from GRS, and along with me are my colleagues from GRS, Lance Weiss, Cassie Rappaport, and Philip Matthew. And today we are going to present the results of the actuarial valuations as of July 1st, 2021, both for the pension valuation and the OPEB valuation. And in addition, we will be talking about one of the key assumptions, the investment return assumption, and we have some additional analysis that we wanted to discuss with you as well.
Lance, you want to go and then have the rest of your team introduce themselves?
Sure. My name is Lance Weiss with Gabriel Roeder Smith and Company. I'm head of the Chicago office, and I've been working with Amy and Cassie and Phil on this account, and we've got a full presentation talking about both pension, OPEB, and as Amy said, the actuarial assumption. Cassie?
Good morning. I'm Cassie Rappaport. I'm a senior analyst with GRS. And as everyone has mentioned, we'll be presenting the results today. Philip?
Hi, I'm Philip Matthew. I'm a senior analyst as well at GRS.
Thank you, guys. And before I kick it off to Phoebe, I just wanted to mention, as Amy had said, normally at this time when we're presenting to Fiscal Management Committee, the results of the 7-1 valuation reports are complete, but GRS, our partners, brought to our attention that this could be an opportunity where we revisit one of the major assumptions, which is the interest rate assumption. So we thought it would be prudent to bring it to your guys' attention, let you know that the decision really hasn't been made yet. We're also going to bring it to the Board of Investment Trustees for their input as well, too. But just so you know, it's a little different than normal, and part of it has to do with the fact that we did so well in our pension fund this year. And then, so with that said, I'm going to thank Phoebe for that and kick it off to Phoebe Kwan, our new Director of Investments.
Thank you, Rob. Can you pause for the presentation, please? So today I'm going to review the assets of the MCPS Retirement System Trust, which provides the pension benefits for MCPS retirees. Next slide, please. So as you know, the pension assets are monitored internally and overseen by the Board of Investment Trustees. The objectives of the pension trust are twofold. First, to pay the benefits when they are due, and second, to achieve the 7% actuarial rate of return. With those targets in mind, the Board of the Investment Trustees, in conjunction with the external investment consultants and managers, construct a portfolio to maximize the investment returns utilizing the reasonable level of risk. Next slide, please. So let's start with a brief review on the key components of the pension. What you see here is a scale representing the balance between the assets and the liabilities. On the left-hand side, what you see here is the building blocks of the assets, including the annual contribution from MCPS, contributions from employees, and returns generated by investing those assets. On the right-hand side, you will see the primary components that drives our liabilities, including the negotiated payout rates, the number of employees, and also the life expectancies of our employees. Assets and the liabilities, they fluctuate from year to year, but the size of these building blocks on the scale are fairly representative of their importance over the life of the plan. Later on, I will be giving you a little bit more insight into the yellow block of the scale, the investment returns, which the Board of Investment Trustees have the greatest influence over. Next slide, please. So here are some of the numbers behind some of the building blocks. In fiscal year 2021, the largest contribution to the assets came from our net investment income of $462 million, followed by the contributions from MCPS and employees. When you take into account of the benefits paid to the MCPS retirees, the pension ended the fiscal year 2021 with a balance of around $2.3 billion. The strong performance of our pension fiscal year 2021 return helped to reducing the gap between the present value of our projected liabilities and our assets and help improve the funding ratio. Next slide, please. So let's get a little bit into the asset allocation that generated the returns. As I had mentioned earlier, one of the primary objectives of the Board of Investment Trustees is to construct a portfolio with exposures to multiple investment strategies. In aggregate, they believe will achieve the actuarial rate of return. So here is an illustration of the investment strategies currently in our portfolio. If we move from the left to right, the left-hand side are those strategies should produce higher returns over time. And the right-hand side are those that will generally provide protection in a weaker economic environment. So part of our day-to-day work includes maintaining the targeted balance of the investments determined by the Board of Investment Trustees. And we often ask ourselves these questions. How does the change improve the likelihood for us to achieving our objectives? And what roles does this decision serve in the above framework? And how do we expect this change to impact the portfolio over time? Next slide, please. The Board of Investment Trustees collaborates with its investment consultants to set the long-term asset allocation strategies for pension portfolio. So where do we stand against our targets? The chart here depicts our long-term targets for those strategies versus where we are today. You may ask, why are we not meeting some of the targets at this current time? So the portfolio is constantly in flux. The movements include our ability to find the right investment to meet the objectives. It can also include market fluctuations. And also there are some investments like those investments in the private markets. They're just not that easy to get into and out of. So some of those movements might impact our ability to hit our target allocation in the near term. And our daily work involves implementing those investments, monitoring them, and coordinating all the different moving parts and the expected impact it has on the portfolio. So let's move on to talk about the performance of this portfolio. Next slide, please. So when we look at the pension investment returns, fiscal year 2021 is an exceptional year. It is performing ahead of our 7% return objective. It is coincided with very strong appreciation in the financial assets as measured by broad market indices. The initial disruptive reaction of the financial markets to the shock of the COVID-19 pandemic fell largely in the prior fiscal year, and the markets were already recovering by the beginning of fiscal year 2021 and have continued to rally, helped by the substantial fiscal and monetary stimulus programs. But it is generally agreed by major financial institutions that the future capital market return assumptions are expected to be lower following the extended period of above average gains. And GRS will be addressing it later this morning. So let's look at our total fund return. Although it is performing ahead of 7% objective, it has lagged a little bit our policy and allocation benchmark. The primary contributor to the underperformance relative to policy and allocation is the gap between the portfolio's target and the actual weights in the private markets portfolio. This portion of the portfolio is expected to meet the target by 2025 based on the latest pacing plan developed by our investment consultants. Now I want to emphasize, while it is prudent to review the assets and the performance in short term, it is more important to keep in mind that we manage our portfolio and investments based on longer term horizon. On that key point, we will continue our work to narrow the gaps between the current and the target allocation, and we'll continue to assist the Board of Investment Trustees to refine the asset allocation strategies in the portfolio, which leads me to our priorities in the next 12 months. The next slide, please. As part of the work I had described so far, we look to make sure that we have the right partners, vendors, and resources to sustain this work. And as the portfolio has grown and the components have become more complex, we're carefully looking at our current investment implementation model and also evaluate our service providers and partners to assess whether we have adequate resources moving forward. In addition, we look to continue to review and assess the portfolio's long-term strategic asset allocation in light of the market conditions and the evolving long-term asset allocation trends. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Dr. Daka, any questions? Yeah, I don't think I have any either. It sounds as though we're looking at, above average performance for this fiscal, but predicting out into the future, that is a bubble that is going to burst, and we're going to be significantly, projected returns will be significantly more modest. Am I getting that just in a nutshell?
Yes. This year is the fiscal year 2021 is really exceptional, and it's generally the market consensus that the capital market return assumption will be much lower in the next decade.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have at this point. So now,
we can move right into the next item and GRS. I think they have a PowerPoint as well.
Yes, if someone could please bring up the GRS presentation. And before we get started diving into all of the numbers, we wanted to do a brief overview of the actuarial valuation process to kind of set the stage. So if you could please advance to slide 31, please. Thank you. So the purpose of the actuarial valuation is to determine the funding status as of the valuation date. So in this case, July 1st, 2021, to develop the recommended annual contribution for the applicable fiscal year, in this case for fiscal year 2023, and then to provide supporting information and additional documentation. You can advance 2 slides, please, to slide 33. On this slide right here, we have a picture of the actuarial valuation process. So on the left-hand side of the slide are the components that go into the actuarial valuation. So covered member data, information as of the valuation date, the asset or financial data, again, as of the valuation date, the plan provisions to let us know how to calculate the benefits and when those benefits are payable. We make actuarial assumptions about the future in order to project future benefits that are expected to be payable from the plan. We have a funding policy in order to tell us how to calculate the contribution requirement. So based on all that information, we produce an actuarial valuation report, and then the main outputs are, as we mentioned, the funding status, the contribution rates, and then accounting information. And just a note that the accounting information actually requires a separate actuarial valuation, which we've completed, but we won't be discussing during the presentation today. Next slide, please. Just a note, when we go through the actuarial valuation results, we're going to be talking about the actuarial value of assets and the market value of assets. So the actuarial value of assets is a smooth value of assets. And the way that we calculate it is we calculate a gain or loss compared to the expected return under the actuarial assumption. It's 7% for the pension valuation. And then we recognize that gain or loss over a 5-year period. So the purpose is to smooth out the asset value and it dampens the volatility of the contribution rates. As of the valuation date, July 1st, 2021, the actuarial value of assets for the pension plan is lower. It's 92% of the market value of assets. So that means that there's deferred asset gains that will be recognized in future actuarial valuations. For the OPEB plan, we do not use the asset smoothing, we use the market value of assets. Next slide, please. We have to use a set of assumptions that goes into calculating the actuarial valuation. We've got our economic assumptions or demographic assumptions. The main economic assumption is the investment return assumption. We'll be talking about that in more detail for the pension plan. The current assumption is 7%. For the OPEB plan, the assumption is 7.5%. And The 7.5% is tied to what Montgomery County uses for their OPEB valuation. And the reason for that is because all of the assets are invested in the same trust. So in order to maintain consistency, we, tie those assumptions together between Montgomery County and Montgomery County Public Schools for the OPEB valuation. So we're using 7% to maintain consistency. Then on the demographic side, we have our other assumptions: retirement rates, mortality rates, pay increases, and so forth. We have some extra additional assumptions needed for OPEB. All of that information goes into the actuarial valuation. Next slide, please. We have what we call an actuarial cost method. So this method tells us how to recognize costs over a member's working career. The cost of the benefits attributable to past service is called the actuarial accrued liability. The cost associated with future benefits that will be accrued is called the value of future normal cost. So we'll be talking about both of those terms as we go through the actuarial valuation results. The normal cost is the cost of benefits accruing in the upcoming year. Next slide, please. Causes of unfunded liability. We'll reconcile the unfunded liability as part of the valuation results, but some reasons for unfunded liability are not keeping up with the benefits accruing and how the actuarial accrued liability is growing. And then experience will be a big one that will reconcile changes in assumptions and so forth. Next slide, please. The funding policy, we'll be talking about the contribution requirement. Here's some details on how that is calculated. The contribution is comprised of two components: the normal cost, the cost of benefits accruing during the year, plus amortization of the unfunded liability. So basically a payment to pay towards the unfunded liability. We calculate that as a level percent of pay. So the payments are calculated, expected to grow in each future year as a dollar amount, remain level as a percent of pay. We also use an amortization period in order to determine how to calculate that payment. A 30-year period is used for the OPEB, and it's an open period, meaning it resets every year. For pension, it's a combination of an open period, 15 years for the unfunded liability not attributable to plan changes, and for the unfunded liability attributable to prior year plan changes, it's a closed period, meaning at the end of that closed period, the unfunded liability attributable to those plan changes will be completely paid off. And I think with that, we can go back to slide 4, please. And then Cassie will start walking us through the pension actuarial valuation results.
All right, thank you. As Amy mentioned, I will be going through the pension valuation results this morning. So first up, we have changes from last year's valuation. There have been no plan provision changes since the last actuarial valuation performed as of July 1st, 2020. Next slide, please. Next, we have changes in assumptions. The results that I will be presenting over the next few slides are based on an investment return assumption of 7%, so no changes in actuarial assumptions or methods. However, we do recommend decreasing the investment return assumption of 7%, and we have performed an analysis on that. So Lance will be going over those results later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have a side-by-side comparison of some of the key results from the 2020 and 2021 valuation results. As you can see at the top, there has been an overall increase in membership from 45,888 members to 46,813. And there was an increase across the board, so a number of actives, inactives, as well as retirees and beneficiaries all increased this year. Next, we have the actuarial accrued liability. There was an overall increase in liabilities from about $2.3 billion to $2.4 billion this year, which is an increase of about $90 million. Liabilities increased again for actives, inactives, and retirees and beneficiaries. Next is the actuarial value of assets, which, as Amy mentioned, is the smoothed value of assets, and that increased from about $1.9 billion to $2.1 billion, or an overall increase of about $165 million. The unfunded liability decreased this year from about $350 million to $274 million, and the funded ratio based on the actuarial value of assets increased from 84.6% to 88.4%. On a market value of assets basis, the funded ratio increased from 80.5% to 96.3%, so a much larger increase there. On the next few slides, we'll discuss what caused these values to change during the year. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have the annual contribution requirements based on the 2020 and 2021 results for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. The total annual required contribution made up of the normal cost and amortization payment components decreased from about $88.7 million to $83.4 million. The board contribution requirement, which is equal to the total contribution minus the expected employee contributions, decreased from about $62.2 million to $56.2 million. Near the bottom of the slide, we have the board contribution as a percent of payroll, which decreased from 3.67% for fiscal year 2022 to 3.2% for fiscal year 2023. And as you can see, the employer normal cost piece only decreased slightly, whereas the amortization of unfunded liability piece decreased by about 0.4%. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have the total required contribution breakdown between the core and supplemental plans. The core benefits are for non-teachers, since teachers are a part of the Maryland State Teachers Pension System, but the supplemental benefits apply to both teachers and non-teachers. The core benefit contribution requirement is about 1.52% of payroll, and the supplemental benefit contribution requirement is about 1.68% of payroll. So the core benefits account for about 48% of the total contribution. Next slide, please. Here we have the reconciliation of the unfunded liability. The blue bars on the graph represent the unfunded liabilities as of July 1st, 2020 and July 1st, 2021. The red line represents the different gains and losses experienced during the year. Under the current funding policy, we expect the unfunded liability to decrease. There was also favorable asset experience this year, about a 25.1% return on a market value basis, as well as a 9.4% return on an actuarial value basis. So there was a gain of about $45 million based on the actuarial value of assets. There was a slight loss due to higher than expected salary increases. There was a gain due to lower than expected cost of living increases for retiree benefits. There was also a gain due to additional contributions made during the year, as well as a gain due to other demographic experience, which includes retirement, mortality, termination, and disability experience. So this results in a total unfunded liability of about $274 million as of July 1st, 2021. Next slide, please. So this slide has a similar reconciliation, but for the board contribution and for the funded ratio based on the actuarial value of assets. The expected board contribution for fiscal year 2023 was 3.6%, but mostly due to the favorable asset experience, there was an additional decrease of 0.4%, resulting in a board contribution of 3.2% of pay for fiscal year 2023. The funded ratio based on actuarial value of assets was expected to increase from 84.6% to 85.6%. But again, due to experience during the year, the funded ratio increased to 88.4%. Keep in mind that the deferred gains will be recognized over the next 4 years. Next slide, please. Here we have the historical and projected funded position and board contribution rate. The blue bars represent the contribution requirement for each year. And as you can see, the contribution requirement in the future continues to decrease as those deferred gains from this year's asset experience are realized. The red line is the funded ratio based on the actuarial value of assets, and the blue line represents the funded ratio based on the market value of assets. The funded ratio continues to increase over the next few years. And as the deferred gains are fully recognized, you can see the market value and actuarial value of assets becomes equal in 2025 at 100%. So it's important to note that these projections are based on a 7% investment return assumption, and they also assume that all other assumptions are realized as well. So are there any questions on the pension results section?
Dr. Daka, do you have any questions? I don't think I do at this point, except just looking at this slide number 11 and the out year projections. I guess not, nobody has a crystal ball, but your level of confidence that the projections will hold and we achieve this matching in 2025.
So of course that does depend on experience in the future, and like I said, is based on whether or not our actuarial assumptions are realized. It also depends on the system making the contributions that we have determined each year in each valuation. Amy or Lance, did you have anything to add to that?
Sure. So the market value of assets funded ratio is 96.3%. So a part of this improvement in the funded ratio on the actuarial value of assets basis is just recognizing those deferred gains that are actually there in the assets. But then I guess a second component is, what returns might be in upcoming years. So based on capital market assumptions, the expectation is that returns, will be lower, than on average 7%. So there may be some shortfalls, just based on the average return being less than 7%. And then of course, there always is volatility. So there, is likely going to be some good years and some bad years. So that will fluctuate some as well. But on average, it looks like the returns might, be lower than 7% based on expectations being lower than they had been previously.
Okay. Thank you. And I think, I guess we're ready to go on to the next part.
All right, then I will turn it over to Lance.
Thank you, Cassie and Amy. So if you could turn to the next page, please. Slide 12. Thank you. So as Amy and Cassie have already kind of indicated, we looked in particular at the investment return assumption. And you've already been told by numerous people that expectations with regard to capital market assumptions in the future are coming down. And so I should mention that we're not investment consultants, we're actuaries. And so we do not create or develop our own capital market assumptions. That's really not our area of expertise. So, however, we do collect capital market assumptions and assumption expectations from 12 financial firms. And by way of background, in terms of actuarial assumptions, actuaries who practice in the United States have what we call actuarial standards of practice that we must follow. And several of those actuarial standards of practice relate to actuarial assumptions. And, on a high level, the requirement is that the actuarial assumptions that we use in our actuarial valuation must reflect our best estimate of anticipated future experience. So when we look at, the 7% assumption, and again, taking into account all of these capital market assumptions from these various firms that are coming down in the future, our belief is that 7% assumption might be a little too high. So based on our analysis and assuming that we maintain the same price inflation assumption of 2.5%, which we still think is probably valid, we come up with a 36% probability of achieving the current assumption of 7%. And basically, we would like to see that probability at least equal to 50%. So 36% probability of achieving the current assumption of 7% is very low. When we did the same analysis in 2019, there was a 48% probability of achieving the 7% assumption. So a much higher probability, and that's a direct result of the fact that these capital market assumptions from 2019 went down in 2020, went down in 2021 again. And as I said, the information we're getting from these financial firms is that they're not expecting a 7%, anywhere near a 7% return in the future. So our recommendation is to decrease the 7% assumption. And I guess the good news, however, and is that you had a phenomenal year in the market. You returned over 25%, which is great. And so that significant return, as Cassie indicated, had the impact of reducing your contribution requirement, increasing the funded ratio. So as I said, the good news is that this is really a particularly good time to consider changing an investment return assumption, which would increase your contribution requirement. But at the same time, you're able to recognize those huge gains that, the 25% gains that you returned over and above the 7% assumption. So it's a good time to consider this. Many of our other clients are doing the exact same thing. One additional possibility is several of our clients, because you had such a great year in the marketplace, several of our clients that are in the same boat as you, in other words, looking at, reducing the investment return assumption, have modified the methodology for calculating the smooth the value of assets, which right now we recognize 20% of the gain, over 5 years. Several of our clients that are looking again at reducing the investment return assumption are looking at potentially recognizing 40% of the fiscal year 2021 gain, and then recognizing the other 60% over the next 4 years. So 40% of the gain, the 2021 gain in fiscal year 2021, and then 15% of the gain in the next 4 years. So that's another thought we have, and we'll give you all the financial impact of those on the next slide. So if you turn to page 13.
Next slide, please.
Yep, thank you. So this is our analysis. And as you can see on the left-hand column here, these are the 12 financial firms where we collect capital markets from, capital market assumptions from. And you can see this column right here, probability of exceeding 7%. So this is the probability for each of those firms based on their capital market assumptions and based on your current asset allocation. So it's based on your asset allocation and the assumptions from these 12 firms. And the average of those probabilities is 35.87%, so about 36%. Now, if you reduce that expectation of 7% return to 6.75, the average of the firm's expectations grows to 38.4%. And if we reduce our investment return assumption to 6.5%, now there's almost a 41% probability of achieving that. And again, that's based on the expectations of these 12 investment firms and your actual asset allocation. So that's just kind of where we're at now based on our analysis. Let's see, if you turn to, let's go to page 17. We've got some more detail, but we don't need to go into all that additional detail. So this is kind of a summary of where we're at now based on our analysis. And the top row, this is the 7/1/2020 result, where we used a 7% assumption. We're recognizing 20% of asset gains over 5 years. And so this is kind of last year's result. if you go to the very next row, 7/1/21, based on an investment return assumption of 7%. So this is what's going to, if we don't change the investment return assumption, this is the change from last year. And actually, Cassie's already presented these results. But the funded ratio on an actuarial value of assets or smooth value of assets basis increased from 84.6% to 88.4%. Cassie already mentioned that. And then the same thing, the percentage of pay contribution requirement decreased from 3.67% to 3.2%. And on a dollar basis, reduced from 62.2 million to 56.2 million. So that's the result. And again, this is exactly what Cassie has already presented to us. Now, if we look at changing the investment return assumption, but keeping the same 20% methodology to recognize gains and losses over 5 years. So going from 7% to 6.75% investment return assumption, that would decrease the funded ratio from 88.4 to about 86% and increase the contribution requirement on a dollar basis from 56 million to 65 million. If we were to reduce the investment return assumption by 50 basis points from 7% to 6.5%, the funded ratio reduces from 88.4 to 83.3, and the contribution requirement goes up to 75 million. Now, the other method that I mentioned was to kind of offset some of the impact of changing the reducing the investment return assumption. We could recognize 40% instead of 20% of the fiscal year 2021 gain in our actuarial value of assets. And so if we combine that, this recognition, this enhanced recognition with the 6.75% investment return assumption, now the funded ratio hasn't changed much. It's gone from 88.4% to 88.6%. And the contribution requirement has come up minimally from 56.2 million to 59.6 million. Now, again, if we reduce the investment return assumption to 6.5, but recognize 40% of the 2021 gain, the funded ratio does go down from 88.4 to 86.0, and the contribution requirement increases from 56.2 million to 69.3 million. And just by way of background, you contributed an extra 9.2 million for fiscal year 2021. So that contribution was 70.9 million. And I'm not suggesting that you would continue to do this additional contribution, but just by way of background, it was a $70.9 million contribution for last year. So that's kind of our analysis, and we would love to get your thoughts on this and any questions you have. So we're open to questions at this point.
Okay, so I will first go to Dr. Daka. Any questions you have at this point?
No, I'm just trying to figure it out, but thank you. Nothing right now.
I know there's a lot of numbers, so.
And Ms. Wolf has joined us, and I'll ask if she has any questions at this point as well.
No questions. Thank you.
This is a bit dense, but I guess the question that I have is, Mr. Weiss, looking at slide 17 again, could you just explain a little bit for those of us who are not actuarials or have PhDs in accounting, when you say you could do your predictions based on realizing 40% gain versus 20% gain, what does that mean?
So the method we use to reflect assets is not market value. Yeah, let's go. Perfect. Thank you very much. So I think Amy went through this in her background. If we were to use market value of assets and compare that to liabilities, market value fluctuates greatly from year to year. So to smooth out some of those fluctuations in market value, we calculate an actuarial value of assets. And basically what we do is on a rolling basis, smooth the fluctuations from year to year in market value over 5 years in the future. So it's kind of, I know there was one slide where we show the market value and actuarial value, and you'll see market value, kind of fluctuates. Actuarial value is a much smoother value. And by using the actuarial value, the smooth value, your contribution requirements are much smoother. If we use market value, your contribution will go up one year, based on bad performance, it would go down significantly. So we're trying to come up with a more level pattern of contribution requirements. So by using the current method that we use is to recognize 20% of asset gains over the following 5 years. And as I mentioned, one method that some of our other clients are considering is because you had such a great year in the market, 25+% return, recognize 40% of that gain this year and then 15% of it for the next 4 years. So that's kind of just a recognition of the asset gain. And how fast we recognize that. And again, it's really our recommendation here is primarily because you had such a phenomenal year in the market. And so you could recognize a little bit more of it this year, which will offset the impact of reducing the investment return assumption.
Okay.
I hope that helps. I know it's still somewhat convoluted.
It's dense. I see Ms. Wolf has her hand up, so I will go to her.
I just wanted to follow up on what you just said. So are you recommending that we recognize 40% instead of the normal 20%? And if so, what if we don't have a good year this year?
Well, we're recommending that you reduce the investment return assumption from the 7%. That's your recommendation.
Okay.
One way to offset some of the impact of reducing that, if we reduce the investment return assumption, it's going to increase your cost. And so one mechanism to reduce some of that cost increase is to recognize a little bit more of the gain. So we're not necessarily recommending it, but we're showing it for consideration. We think it probably makes some sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Can I just add I'm sorry. So when we're talking about cost, I just want to make it clear. So we use these numbers when we develop our FY23 budget. So if looking at this slide, if you look at the 7/1/21, there's a range there of $20 million from the 56 to the 75. So that has to be taken into consideration as we develop the budget as well too. I know it's prudent to be realistic about our investment return rate, but that the other side of that, like Lance mentioned, is the cost.
Thank you.
Okay, now that you've brought that up, why was our rate good this year? Did I get that right? This year was a good year?
Yes, you had a phenomenal return in the market. I think Phoebe went through those results, right?
She may have, but I'm asking, why is that? Because we weren't open, or I don't know, what is it?
So may I clarify the question? So why this year is phenomenal in terms of the investment return?
Right.
Yeah. So market has cycles, right? It has up and down. So we're really now at the kind of the peak of the market cycle. And one thing that I mentioned earlier is really the COVID-19 has a big impact on the financial markets in the fiscal year 2020. So the market goes down dramatically before the start of the fiscal year 2021. But that the financial market return has gone up and recovered at the beginning of our fiscal year 2021 and continue to rally as of today. So, and mainly just driven by the fiscal and also the monetary stimulus programs.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else with any additional follow-up or questions? And I would extend that out to the folks on our finance staff as well, since this is your bread and butter.
As mentioned in the beginning, Lynn, one of the other things we want to do is run this by the Board of Investment Trustees for their input as well too, which will happen in a few weeks at that next meeting.
Okay. And then, Mr. Riley, you'll be bringing that back to the board For me.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Board of Investment Trustees is December 3rd after the December 2nd meeting, so it would be in January. And so GRS still, we just want to take a quick look at our OPEB valuation results as well, too. If there's no other questions on this.
I think we're ready to go on.
Okay, that is back to me. So if you could please share the screen again. And we've got the OPEB results starting on slide 19, please. So we had some changes in assumptions for the OPEB valuation. They were related to resetting the trend rates, to resetting the medical trend rate at 8% initially, grading down in 0.25% increments to an ultimate trend increase rate of 4.25%, and then resetting the prescription drug trend assumption to 8.5%, again, grading down to an ultimate assumption of 4.25%. And then we have updated our age-adjusted claims costs using the actuarial valuation through June of 2021. Next slide, please. On this page, we have a side-by-side result of the actuarial evaluation results, similar to what we did for the pension plan, but this page is now looking at OPEB. We've got our membership data, our actives who may be receiving healthcare benefits, retiree healthcare benefits in the future, and then our retirees and beneficiaries that are currently receiving healthcare benefits. We've got our actuarial accrued liability increased from about 1.79 billion to 1.81 billion, an increase of 16.5 million. We have our market value of assets that we use for the OPEB valuation increased by about 200 million to 769 million. As a result of the assets increasing a lot more than the liabilities, there was a decrease in the unfunded liability, or the difference between the actuarial accrued liability and the assets, decreased from about 1.2 billion to 1 billion. The funded position or funded ratio, the assets divided by the liabilities, increased significantly from 31.7% to 42.5%. On the next slide, we look at the contribution requirements. Again, we've got our components, we've got our normal cost, we've got our amortization of the unfunded liability to get our contribution requirement. Because of the favorable asset experience, and it was fully recognized because we're using market value of assets, there was a decrease in the requirement from about 150 million to 137 million. And then in terms of making the contributions, the pay-as-you-go benefits, or the benefits that have occurred during the year, are paid. And then on top of that, there's an additional contribution that's made to the OPEB trust. So the 137 million is comprised of the expected benefit payments that'll be paid out in the upcoming year of about 80 million net benefit payments, and then an additional contribution of 57 million that would be contributed to the OPEB trust. When looking at this in terms of a percent of payroll, the contribution rate decreased from 8.34% of pay to 7.42% of pay. Next slide, please. Similar again to pension, we've got our reconciliation. How did we get from the contribution requirement for fiscal year 2022 to 2023, and our funded status between 2020 and 2021? We would have expected an increase in the funded status, a slight increase in the contribution requirement, but because of experience, in this case, both the asset experience and some healthcare related experience, the actual contribution rate is lower than expected, and the funded ratio is higher, and it increased, by a pretty good amount, all recognizing this year because of the market value of assets being used. Next slide, please. We have a historical look at both the funded ratio and the contribution requirements. The line, the blue line with the percentages, represents the funded ratio since 2015. So in 2015, the funded ratio was 19.1%, and it has, for the most part, increased up to the current level of 42.5%. Then we have our bars. So the dark blue bar is the contribution requirement that we're calculating the actuarial valuation based on the funding policy. And then the green bar is the actual contribution that was made. So you can see that the actual contribution has been less than the contribution requirement, meaning that the full additional contribution amount that we've been calculating the actuarial valuation has not been contributed to the trust. So there has been a lower amount contributed, although in the more recent years, the actual contribution has been a lot closer. Let's see, you can go to slide 25, please. And here's some just additional details on the contribution deficiency. The amount that has been contributed has been less than the actuarially determined contribution. So we recommend that the county resume contributing the full amount calculated in the actuarial valuation, including the pay-as-you-go benefit payments and the additional contribution to the trust. And then we'd also recommend a change in the amortization method to a 30-year close period, just so there's a specific point in time in the future that the plan would be expected to be 100% funded. And the amounts at the bottom show those additional contributions that would be made in fiscal year 2022 and 2023, in addition to the pay-as-you-go payments to be made in full according to the actuarial valuation. So for fiscal year 2022, that amount would be about $78.4 million. It's the amount all the way to the right, and it's the second row up. And then for fiscal year 2023, it would be $57.4 million. So with that, we're happy to take any questions on the OPEB valuations or any additional questions from any other topic we've discussed earlier.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Daka, any additional questions at this point?
No, thank you.
And Ms. Wolf?
No, thank you.
I do have one. If you, Ms. Williams, if you go back to slide 23, and then I think the slide that preceded it was slide 22, talking about the actuarial recommendations around contributions and the actual contributions the school system has made. And for, 2015, 16, 17, there was a pretty significant gap between those, and then the gap has been closing. And maybe this is a question for you, maybe this is a question for Mr. Riley or Mr. Klausing, but why was that gap initially so wide, and why have we been able to close that?
So to set the framework, when we were speaking about pension before, that contribution is made by MCPS. With regards to OPEB, since the OPEB fund was started, well, actually, since we've been part of the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefit Trust Fund, part of the county plan, that actual contribution outside of PAYGO is made by the county. So I can let you know, in that year where it was significantly decreased, that was part of the county savings plan. So that kind of explains why the amount hasn't reached the exact actuarial recommendation. And other years, so we do an evaluation, and they do one as well too. As far as I know, our assumptions are pretty much the same, but they could be doing what's based on their actuarial evaluation for the rest of the consolidated trust. So we like to keep our assumptions similar, and we like to have a range of where it should be, but that could be part of the reason why it's slightly decreased as well too. Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but there could be some minor variations with that, right?
If they're determining or making their contributions based on something other than our GRS actuarial valuation, then that could be contributing to it as well.
If I could just add to the conversation that the other factor is about several years ago, I'm going to guess around 2015 or so, the county started applying $27.2 million of the MCPS OPEB funding, the funding for future retirees' health benefits costs, to current retirees' health benefits costs to meet the total needs of MCPS. So that would affect this as well.
And so, Mr. Riley, when you were saying when they did this and that, you're talking about the county's finance office and their benefits folks?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. I think that's all the questions that I have at this point. What's next? We have GRS. Do you have anything additional at this point?
That's it for GRS. I think we're on to updates now.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you. Again, thank you to GRS. I really appreciate this is very important to the fiscal health of the system, but also quite dense for those of us not schooled in the actuarial sciences. So next we are moving on to item 5.1, which is an update from Mr. Adams and Ms. Zarate on the ongoing work in the system around our sustainability initiatives. So I will turn it over to Mr. Adams.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I know we've had some great conversations about our new approach to sustainability. Obviously, as we're working through, the process of bringing to the board, through policy review, a new approach to sustainability work still continues on. So what we're here today is to provide some updates around some of these initiatives and
Mr. Adams, could you turn the volume up a little bit?
Will do. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to transition over to Ms. Zarate to provide some of these critical updates.
Good morning. Can you hear me a little better?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, this morning we have 3 topics that we want to bring to you for updates. Can someone pull up the slides for us, please? I think they start with sustainability.
Oh, yes. If we could pull up the sustainability slides, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. That looks great. So this morning we're here to talk to you about 3 new initiatives that we have launched or are in the process of launching this fall. Next slide, please. We will be talking about our food scraps composting pilot program that we've launched. We'll be talking about increasing our solar power that we're generating at MCPS, and we'll also be talking about a new initiative in terms of investment grade audit. And before we turn to the rest of this presentation, I did want to also note that in terms of the electric vehicle conversion for the school buses, those charging stations are fully installed at this point, and they do expect the buses to arrive later this month to be able to serve the 25 clusters. So that's also another exciting initiative that we're not really going to go into any more detail on. Next slide, please. So as part of our work with the students and work with the community, we have been able to launch a new partnership with the Montgomery County Department of Environment, which we have two facilities that are large generation facilities, and we already have begun collecting commercial food scraps at these 2 facilities. The Montgomery County government is actually providing a lot of support for this program and supports many other commercial businesses in the county in implementing food scraps recycling for 1 year at no cost to the commercial company. The Department of Environment has secured the required processing capacity at the facility where the food scraps go to, and the food scraps in this case are going to the Western Branch Compost Facility in Prince George's County. And the Department of Environment is also funding containers, hauling, and facility processing fees. One of the key requirements of the county program, however, is that they're pre-consumer food scraps, meaning that it's not anything that has been touched by the users and put into garbage cans. It's actually behind the serving. Next slide, please. In this program, it allows many more materials than what you could be able to compost in your residential facility. Normally at home, you can just take care of the fruits and vegetables, but in this case, there are many more components that can be required, such as meats, fish and bones, breads and grains, and baked goods and dairy products. Now, when we initially started this, we weren't sure how much we were actually going to be able to recover, but we found that there is actually a significant amount of vegetable preparation materials that are needed either when they're creating sandwiches or salads, such as the ends of the carrots, the lettuce, the broccoli, the tomatoes, or even food that's required by the health department to be disposed of at the end of each day. Another type of food that we're seeing is the ends of breads, or with the giant production lines, they have a lot of breadcrumbs in those bags, and we're able to recycle those breadcrumbs. In addition, something that may have fallen on the floor and that's required by the health department to be recycled or to be disposed of is now, instead of being disposed of, is able to be composted. And certainly once we return to the implementation of salad bars, we will see that this volumes will increase. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we rolled this out in 2 different central facilities in Montgomery County Public Schools. The first one is the Division of Food and Nutrition Services on Turkey Thicket Road, and we've actually been able to recover between 600 and 700 pounds per week there. At the other facility, the Carver Educational Services Center, the cafeteria, again, behind the line, they're recovering about 100 pounds per week. This program started on October 11th of this year, and since then, we've recovered about a ton of material already so far. So it's really great news about the amount of food scraps that we've been able to recover instead of sending to the incinerator. Next slide, please. In terms of solar photovoltaics, we expect to increase our current production by about 50% with the request for proposals that was sent out in October, and we received the responses in November of this year, earlier this month. We anticipate a recommendation to be made to the board in the January 2022 meeting, and if approved, construction would start in the early part of next year, and with the goal of having at least 4 sites operational by summer of 2023, and the additional sites operational no later than the summer of 2024. We expect that we will get at least 2 megawatts, which is effectively increasing our production by over 50% at the 8 rooftop sites. Next slide, please. The way that this is going to be financed is through a power purchasing agreement, which is a long-term contract where we actually purchase the electricity from the energy generator that places those solar panels on the roof. The great part about this is that the company that creates these solar panels on our roofs take all the financial risk on, and we just serve as a host for the vendor to install, operate, and maintain and ensure the system. There is no upfront cost for us, and we enter into a 20-year agreement for solar costs of electricity, which is typically much less than the electricity cost that we're paying from our commercial vendors. Next slide, please. This is a list of the schools where we plan to add PV. You'll note that many of them are either new schools or schools that had relatively new roofs on them. We continue to look at our construction inventory and our new roof inventory for the next phase that will roll out after this. Next slide, please. There were some other innovative ideas that we included in this RFP for solar. The first request for pricing that we requested for was a purchase of solar from offsite ground mounts. So those wouldn't be located on MCPS property, but they'd be located somewhere else, and we would purchase that solar. So we requested pricing for that. In addition, we requested pricing for installation of canopies of photovoltaics on our parking lots, as well as pricing for installation of parking lot lighting that would be run by solar photovoltaics. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it back over to Seth. Hopefully his audio is corrected.
Yes, so hopefully you can hear me better this time. I'll speak a little bit louder. This portion of it is related to the energy improvements. Essentially working with ESCOs. We actually started this process pre-COVID. One of the challenges during the COVID pandemic was the fact that much of this work has to go into our schools, has to develop baselines of how the buildings are operating, has to understand essentially the new norms of our HVAC systems, the new norms of having air cleaners in our buildings. So we are taking a step back and we're re-engaging with these groups, and we are essentially going to request a request for proposal to essentially revisit this and have companies come back through and start to do the assessment of our buildings. We talked about this briefly during our CIP sessions because we're also looking to, through the superintendent's request, add money to support this. We know many of these improvements can be done, essentially the work itself can be performed at no cost to MCPS, other than us purchasing, the energy savings or through energy savings. But we know sometimes that's not always the case. So through the CIP process, we are asking for additional funds to support this so that we can have more robust projects moving forward. But we wanted to bring this to you to flag that this is going through a request for qualifications. And again, probably very similar to the time frame that Ms. Arate outlined for our solar initiative. We'd like to bring this back to the board for consideration of multiple firms. Next slide. So again, this program, the goal of it is to increase energy efficiency and the performance of the building and reduce the overall energy usage and demand. So this is a great segue of work that can happen with third-party partners, but also work that continues to happen in our schools through the CERT team, through new conversations, new invigorated conversations with students, and obviously staff that are part of our green schools initiatives. But this is a very specific program, but for us, it has very holistic opportunities. And as you can see, these include everything from the energy and performance, but also things that we also heard about in our CIP work sessions. Everything around HVAC improvements, to different lighting systems in the building, everything from auditoriums to our hallways to our classrooms. So this is a very broad program that we're very excited to bring to the board in the coming months. Next slide. And that's what we have as updates. One piece I would just say I would add to Ms. Arate's conversations around the solar. We have had some more robust conversations with the county council, with the county executive and county staff around how can we as a county, including MCPS, leverage our initiatives as one instead of just individual agencies doing it. One of the things that we traditionally hear in some of the constraints, particularly when it comes to solar initiatives, is that many of the incentives are around tax-based, right? And as a tax-exempt entity, are there different opportunities that exist for us as a county as a whole to pursue this on a much more aggressive nature than what we have been? So those conversations continue, but as Lynn pointed out, this is a great step to continue the work in our solar initiative by partnering with third parties and purchasing power from them. But I did want to just flag to the Fiscal Management Committee that this is ongoing conversations, it is ongoing work, and we're hopeful to expand it as a county-wide initiative beyond just the agency approach in the very near future as well. So that's what we have as updates, and glad to answer any questions.
Hey, thank you. Dr. Daka.
Yes, back to slides 2 and 3. No, I'm sorry, 3 and 4. At the last line under new partnerships, it says only pre-consumer food scraps are recycled, but I'm looking at what can be composted. It looks like it's been partially consumed. Am I not understanding this?
You're right. The graphic is probably a little bit misleading. The idea is they could be partially consumed, but it's coming from behind the the serving line. So it's not typically partially consumed.
It's not coming from the trays.
No, it's not coming from after the students have it. Yeah, it's coming from before the students would receive it. So food preparation materials as opposed to
and slide 6, photovoltaic. Are we going to be able to explain how we chose the schools that are going to be involved in this? What does the public need to know? What do our students need to know? Because they're the ones asking all these questions about why we aren't doing certain things that have to do with the environment. What's the reason that these schools were chosen? Were they physically able to do this, or just, I don't know, just making a decision about certain places?
So when we do this work, we want to get them in batches of work. And so the schools that were picked were either brand new schools that were very optimally had the good roof space and the good orientation to be able to do it, or they were schools that recently had a re-roofing project, because you have to have a relatively new roof to be able to put this on. We are working on the next batch of roofs that will be done. Once we get this thing underway, we'll be starting another requisition and request for proposals for the next step.
Okay, but Maryvale we were working on recently. Sherwood Elementary
Sherwood has a new roof. Sherwood has a new roof.
Oh, see, that's the kind of thing that the students need to know. I don't know how we get that to them, but they keep asking questions. And on slide number, 9, the parking canopies and the parking lot lighting, we would have to do that from our construction funds?
So we're requesting pricing for this to see what it would look like. The hope is, again, that we would be able to lease just the energy from them, and that it wouldn't require an upfront cost, but then we haven't finished our analysis of this. So we'll have more to come soon on whether or not there's a cost to this, or how that financial part works out.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Wolf.
Dr. Daka actually asked one of the questions that I had, and that was about the schools that were selected. One, I wanted to say that I'm glad to see that you selected schools from all over the county for this. And 2, I was just wondering, did all of these schools have new roofs? Because usually when you're doing this kind of work, you do it, I thought, when you're installing the roof, not after you've already installed it.
So we have a capital program that goes through our roofs and puts new roofs on schools approximately every 23 years. So those would be part of the re-roofing program on the ones that weren't the brand new schools. It is important to us to make sure that schools that are not brand new, that the students have an ability to feel like they're engaging in sustainability initiatives. So it's absolutely critical that we can do this on a school that has a re-roofing project.
Okay, so these schools don't already have a new roof. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, they recently got new roofs.
So the roofs were already installed too? Okay, to address this issue though, because I was trying to figure out, are you going to have to go back and tap into the new roofs that you already installed?
The roofs have already been installed. When we installed the solar, we worked very closely between the roofing vendor and the solar contractor to make sure that there's minimal disruption to the roof.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with what you said there, that we need to let people know that that's why those schools were chosen, because they have new roofs. And I wasn't quite getting that. Thank you.
And I just wanted to be clear, Seth, you mentioned that this program was at no cost to MCPS, but you were asking for additional funds in the CIP. So could you just go over again for me one more time what the additional funds you're asking for would cover?
Yeah, so part of that program is, it's called an investment grade audit. So companies would come in and they would look at our buildings, see how they're operating, essentially, and then they would make a recommendation, let's say to replace the lighting system and the HVAC systems, and that would fit within their portfolio of energy savings, and then ultimately how that would work from a financial standpoint. The piece that we're asking additional funds for is that for us to be able to expand those scopes slightly beyond just that investment grade audit. So these third parties that would come in are obviously going to focus on things that make sense from their financial portfolio. For us, many of the things that they're going to focus on are obviously part of our aging infrastructure, but there's usually more beyond that. So if we were to add, let's say, plumbing fixtures, or add, a restroom renovation component to one of these projects, that wouldn't necessarily, this company would not necessarily be able to include in their portfolio approach, we could do that at our cost. And it could be a more holistic approach to a building versus just the investment grade audit and the energy and cost savings approach. So that's the part that we felt was really important, to be able to fund those projects that if we're in there, we're doing significant amount of work associated with these projects, to be able to do it all while we're there versus just do a part of it and then have to come back 2 years later with MCPS only funds to do the balance.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure I understood that, because people are going to say, I thought it was a free program and you have it in the CIP. I also think it's a very good idea that you're thinking about how you could leverage this program in working with the county. We could probably save some money if we could come up with a more holistic approach for the entire county. So that's great. And lastly, I just want to say, I agree with Judy. That picture is very misleading, because I thought, okay, it said that the food was not consumed, but it looked like it was eaten to me too. So thank you for that.
Point taken. Thank you for the observation.
Okay, so I just have a couple questions. First, it's exciting that we're participating in the county's food waste recycling composting pilot, and looking at the future, what we might be able to accomplish in the future. Because, listening to what's happened in Glasgow, we know that food going into the waste stream and landing in landfills and incinerators is actually a pretty big contributor to some of the warming that we're seeing globally. And we have students in, the compostology group and the capital compost group at BCC, or capital compost, that have started the post-consumer. So I think what Ms. Wolf and Dr. Docker were thinking about, the afters composting in schools, and they've got their World Wildlife Fund grant. And I know, because I am very excited to live in a neighborhood where the county is piloting its food waste recycling program, which is, of course, after use, home use as well. So is there a possibility that, that you are, part of the county's climate action plan and climate action team, that the kind of composting that Dr. Daka and Ms. Wolf were just talking about, what comes off a student's tray when they're finished eating lunch, is that a possibility that the county's food waste recycling that's currently happening in neighborhoods could expand to our schools?
So with regards to the student-led initiatives, it's been very difficult to recruit schools at this point in light of COVID and implementing outdoor lunches, but we definitely want to support the work that both the compost crew and the compostology students are doing. So we've regrouped and we've talked about some new strategies that we can work on with them. We're currently working with the third-party nonprofit to establish an MOU and standardize our communications to make sure that we're just all on the same page, and so we can help support them better. We've reviewed our data and our sustainability action plans that we received back from the schools, and we're identified some other schools that may be interested in participating in composting programs. And so we're actually meeting with those students and some principals this week on that to help those programs continue. In terms of the county program for residential post-consumer recycling, I was actually on a call with them this morning, and there's actually a press event on Thursday related to that. At this point, it's just residential, what the county is doing for the post-consumer. And so we have not had a chance yet to explore if that possibility could be expanded to the schools. In general, the county views our schools as commercial and not residential. But we're definitely in regular communication with the county DEP staff and solid waste staff on ways that we can promote this. I think the other thing that's critically important is what you said earlier about the food waste. Identifying ways that we can just keep the food out of the trash is really what we're trying to do here. So I do have some phone calls in right now to figure out what are some different things that we can do to just keep the food into people's stomachs instead of worrying about composting it and incinerating and that kind of stuff. So that is another interest that we have, and something we hope to work with the students moving forward. It was definitely part of their World Wildlife Fund grant request too. So that's something we just got to get a little bit further down the road on COVID, and then I think this thing is going to hit the ground running and take off pretty quick.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to see. I mean, I'm thrilled to have my green bin now and be participating in the county's program. And looking at the map and the neighborhoods in which they're doing the pilot, I'll be very interested to see if we start hearing students who are whose households are doing this composting start to bring, organically the idea to their own school. So if we start to see schools in those areas where the neighborhoods are participating, if the students start to extend their thinking to, hey, we could do that at school too. So that'll be interesting. And I'm hoping that since the schools are such a big part of the county's climate action plan, that as that pilot moves forward and they do their data collection and monitoring, that we can convince them that we aren't just, sort of a pre-consumer customer, but also could be participating in both ends of their food waste recycling program. And then the other question I had goes to the solar photovoltaic and the 8 roofs. So could you just big picture it for us as far as the impact on the school system specific budgets with the installation? And are we anticipating that installation on these roofs would be handled by the vendor and that we would then be buying that energy from the vendor? Or is it that, and then what happens with the excess energy that goes back to the grid that those schools don't use? We get a cost back from that.
Right. So exactly what you said. The way the contract works is that we basically allow them to put their panels on our roofs. And as payment for that, we purchase the solar that is generated on those roofs. Most of the time, we're not generating excess. We're using a lot of energy and we need all of that. However, if the case exists where we are actually generating more than we actually need, we are supposed to be getting a credit on our utility bill for that energy, excess energy.
So then that ties into the ESCO and the audits and reducing energy consumption, which could then turn this into a revenue generator for us.
So they're not directly related to the ESCOs, but again, the ESCOs are looking at total energy consumed and they're looking to seek to drive down the total energy. So if at one of these schools that had solar ended up using a whole bunch less energy because of the ESCO, and now we would be putting more energy back to the grid, then yes, we would get a credit on our PEPCO bill or whichever utility provider that happens to be.
Yeah, it's all such exciting stuff. I'm so happy to see us really kind of taking this seriously as we are looking at all of our projects system-wide, and look forward to hearing what you're going to be bringing back. I think you said in January, Mr. Adams, to the board. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Dr. Daka or Ms. Wolf?
Yeah, it's a very long ago question. Slide 40 on OPEB. It says county contributed less than ADC during the fiscal. Does that mean Montgomery County or board was used elsewhere? So I wasn't sure whether they meant board there or they do mean county.
That is Montgomery County, Dr. Daka. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Wolf? Okay. Thank you. And that takes us on to our last agenda item, which is looking at the Maryland Accountability and Implementation Board, which is part of the blueprint, and our new blueprint coordinator, and getting just an initial tip of the iceberg from what we know now about what the requirements on the system are going to be, and our obligations to the Accountability and Implementation Board going forward. So I will turn it over to Dr. Dawson to kick us off and then introduce our new coordinator.
Okay, just so excited to have Janine with us on the blueprint and as our coordinator. So we're excited to also gain more information around the blueprint. That's one of the things that we are working with MSDE on. And what Janine will talk about today, I think, is really about what she knows about the accountability board, and just, I think, some main ideas for us to know at this point as we're moving forward, because the board really has officially just started its work and has been named. So now that it's in place, what are our next steps? Janine, I'll pass it over to you.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting that the accountability board has 2 Montgomery County members. Dr. Kerwin, I'm sure was no surprise to anybody, and then former County Executive Mike Leggett, who's been named chair of the Accountability and Implementation Board. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out for MCPS as the board rolls out.
Absolutely.
Good morning. Thank you. I think we're ready for the slides. Let me just begin
Welcome
by
back,
saying,
Janine.
thank you. Let me just begin by saying the intent of the blueprint law was to transform Maryland to a high-performing state and for it to become more internationally competitive, to allow students to be successful in the 21st century economy and more productive citizens of Maryland. Next slide. The Blueprint House Bill 1300 passed in 2020. It was vetoed by the governor due to COVID and funding uncertainty, and it became a law following the veto override in the 2021 session. The bill contains comprehensive funding and policy reforms in 5 major policy areas based on the Kerwin Commission report. The House Bill 1372 passed in 2021 to update the Blueprint bill and address COVID issues by increasing technology funding and requiring local boards to implement summer school programs, provide tutoring and supplemental instruction, and address trauma and behavioral health issues. Next slide. There are 5 policy areas for mandated reforms under the Blueprint bill. They include high quality early childhood education and care, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, college and career readiness pathways, including career and technology education and technical education, more resources to ensure all students are successful, and governance and accountability. Next slide. In terms of early childhood education, the Blueprint will expand full-day pre-K at no cost for 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds from families with incomes up to 300% of the federal poverty level, and for 4-year-olds from families between 300 to 600% of the federal poverty level using a sliding scale. It will implement a school readiness assessment for all students entering kindergarten, and that's the existing kindergarten readiness assessment that's already in use. Beginning in 2022-23, eligible private childcare providers will account for at least 30% of eligible pre-K providers in the county. That 30% floor will be raised to 50% by 2026-27. Next slide. Elevating teachers and leaders will mandate 10% raises over the next 5 years, over a 5-year period. It will mandate starting salaries of at least $60,000 for new teachers, and it will mandate an implementation of a career ladder with different steps and levels from state certified teacher, nationally board certified teacher, master's degrees up to assistant principals. It will mandate a $10,000 increase for nationally board certified teachers. It will mandate a $7,000 raise for nationally board certified teachers who are working at low performing schools. We don't have quite a definition yet of low performing schools, so we're hoping to get some clarification from the Accountability and Implementation Board. It will look at different amounts of time in the workday for teachers and others in the career ladder so that they have additional time to spend collaborating with other teachers, working with low performing students, and helping to support students who may have the highest needs. It will also change the practicum for teacher training from 100 days to a 1-year practicum over a period of time. And they will be working with teacher preparation programs in colleges and universities in Maryland. Next slide. Okay, the college and career readiness is the third policy area. It will require all local school systems to provide all students who meet the college and career standard with access to a set of post-college and career program pathways. It will adopt the college and career standards set to global standards to certify that students have the requisite literacy in English and mathematics, and when practicable, science, needed to succeed in the first year credit-bearing community college courses, and to hopefully avoid the need for the remedial classes. Develop alternative educational approaches for students in middle school and early high school who are not likely to meet the college and career standard by the end of 10th grade. Next slide. It will make a provision for more resources for high-need students. The blueprint revises the funding formula weight for special education, English language learners, and students who are eligible for free and reduced price meals. It will mandate additional services for struggling learners. It adds a concentrated poverty weight to the funding formula for supportive, intensive, coordinated services for students and their families in distressed communities. It adds a fixed categorical funding amount for each school with concentrated poverty to be used to establish or enhance community schools and to establish or enhance school health and behavioral services. Next slide. Community schools will be identified based on 80% free and reduced price meal student count. And then the 80% threshold will drop each year by 5% to an eligibility for community schools at 55% free and reduced price meals. Community schools will receive per pupil grants and personnel grants for community school coordinators. Community school coordinators must ensure wraparound services are provided via partnerships with outside organizations and agencies that can support the children and families. Community schools also will receive personnel grants for mandated behavioral health service coordinators. Next slide. The blueprint also creates an accountability board, and there's a governance and accountability, which is one of the 5 policy areas. It will create this, what we call the AIB, to develop a comprehensive 10-year plan and monitor and hold school systems and other entities, counties, accountable for implementing the law and the Kerwin Commission recommendations. The AIB is not intended to usurp or abrogate the day-to-day decision-making of county boards, local superintendents, institutions of higher education, or other stakeholders. And I just want to add that I received notice this morning that there will be a first meeting today of the Accountability and Implementation Board. I think the folks who are staffing that board were just named about a week or so ago. So there's a lot of information from this board criteria that we're waiting to hear about. Next slide. The Accountability Board mandates initially that they'll hold 25% of new funds, an increase in state education formula funds over the prior fiscal year, to be released only if the AIB finds that the school system has an AIB approved plan. And it will be several months before we are able to get the criteria, the approved criteria from the ARB that will help us determine what data and other points need to be included in our plan that will be due at the end of the year. So after 2 years, the AIB may also withhold more than 25% of new funds. If they find a school system is not in compliance with the blueprint mandates, they can withhold funds. For FY22 through 26, the county and the local school system jointly appoint a single implementation coordinator responsible for the implementation of the blueprint. That would be my position. And going forward, that position is helping to be responsible for pulling together all the recommendations and implementation based on the guidance from MCPS, the county executive, and the county council. Next slide. The AIB must complete Blueprint Comprehensive Implementation Plan by February 15, 2022, and they must share that information out with local school boards so that we understand what specific data points and information that they require for us to be in compliance. And after February 15th and no later than April 1st, MSDE must develop criteria to be used to recommend approval or disapproval of local school systems implementation plans. I'll just add that they will have some expert review teams that will be sent out by the AIB to visit each of the school systems and to talk with them about their implementation plans to ensure compliance with the law. Local boards must submit their implementation plans to the AIB by June 15, 2022. Next slide. Here is just a cursory list of FY22 deliverables per the blueprint plan. And we have been told that perhaps some of these dates may be adjusted after the AIB has an opportunity to meet. There are some pieces that they may take them longer to develop the criteria. And so they make some changes, but preliminarily, these are the deliverable dates that we have so far for the blueprint plan. So we're operating using these current deadlines right now. Next slide. And here's just a listing of the MCPS, the blueprint funding allocation from 20 to FY22. So I will open it up to see if there are any questions. I know that was very quick. It was just a cursory overview.
Well, thank you. And I just want to acknowledge quickly that I did make a mistake and I skipped over an agenda item, the oral update on the progress on our state audit. And we will pick up that item at our next fiscal management committee meeting. And again, my apologies. So anyway, Dr. Daka, questions about the blueprint?
Yes, very quickly. I know that I've seen this before, but they want assistant principals to teach 20%. I have a concern about that, and I know that's something that's larger than I am, but assistant principals already have enough trouble observing classes and meeting with teachers about what they're observing. I just find that is onerous for them. I don't know, just that I just think it's difficult, and principals have enough trouble getting into the classrooms to see how the teaching is going because their responsibilities outside of the instructional part they're very heavy.
I think that your concerns are shared by other implementation coordinators and other boards across the state. The blueprint does say that the teaching portion will be optional for the principals, but it does build it in for other assistant principals and teacher leaders who are on the career track. And then, there's also looking at sort of going in these different parallel tracks. So if you are in this career ladder and moving forward, then that would be an expectation for you. But your concern is shared as well in terms of the other duties and responsibilities that administrators have in the schools. So I think that one of the things that was raised, I actually heard Dr. Kerwin speak recently, and that was one of the concerns that was raised about having time to meet all of the responsibilities. And so I think that's some of the feedback that will be shared with the Accountability and Implementation Board about folks who are on that career ladder track.
Well, when you mentioned the career ladder, all of those people have taught. So I'm not sure, what the purpose is here.
I'm not sure either. I'm not sure either.
Ms. Wolf, any questions?
I'm like Judy. I have a lot of questions, but I've heard several presentations on this. One most recently by the Maryland Association of School Boards, which was very detailed. So I'm not sure that you even have answers to this yet, but I'm concerned about, a slide. Wait a minute. Okay. The slide number 3, it includes career and technical education, and yet the teachers that teach CTE are not in their definition of teachers. That's one concern that we're consistently hearing. Another from
yes, they're not considered in that area for the nationally board certified teacher. Right. Yes, that is correct.
I'm also concerned in slide number 7, where it refers to distressed communities. It doesn't say schools. So what's a distressed community?
That is a definition that some of those definitions that we're still waiting to get some clarification around. The term equity is also used frequently. And so in one place it refers to equity across the state. And then we're trying to find out some clarification about, is it equity in the county? Is it equity in the school, the individual school? So I think we're waiting for some clarification on a number of these issues from MSDE and or from the AIB. one of the other issues, namely, is the definition of the low-performing schools. And so we have the MCPS equity accountability model. Other school systems across the state have their own ways of determining who are low-performing schools. And so there's some places in the bill that provide some sort of different definitions who will determine who's a low-performing school. So I think that's one of the issues that has gone forward. They have made Dr. Kerwin aware of it and MSDE. And so there's still a lot of answers. There's still a number of things that we don't have clarification about yet. We're hoping that with the AIB board in place that we will get some further explanation and clarification on some of these points. And they're actually having their first meeting today at 1 o'clock. That's also going to be televised live. So I'm hoping that we will be able to sort of hear an overview and hear the direction in which they're going. And I would just, the other thing I'll just add is across the state, there were some concerns about raised regarding community-based pre-K programs being able to meet the capacity to ratchet up from 30% next year all the way up to 50% by FY 2026. So we are sort of staying tuned, and there's some various coordinators across the state. We're asking some key questions and hoping to get some answers very soon.
Well, I realize there are a lot of questions that you can't answer. These are just things that are on my mind that I'm sort of expressing. Because
as well as others.
The other is this 100-day to 1-year teaching training program. Well, this is a Maryland blueprint, so it's very easy for them to work with the schools of education in Maryland. But what if we're hiring teachers from other states that don't have a year requirement? How is that going to be handled? And I know you don't have an answer to that. It's just something that I'm wondering about.
I don't know. I think I imagine it would impact whether or not they would have reciprocity in their certification within Maryland, but that is a really good question. I think for the question also was raised in terms of others who may be working in various settings, childcare or other locations, who are trying to complete a practicum and also work at the same time. So that's a great question. And I'm not sure how that will impact. We know that Maryland colleges and universities only account for 40 to 45% of the teachers that we need across the state to staff our schools. And so, trying to certainly make the salaries more competitive and provide some other incentives for a career ladder could be a way to then draw these teachers to our state to help fill some of our vacancies. But then at the same time, if the requirements may prohibit them, that could be a stumbling block and a challenge for us.
And my last two comments are just, and you don't have an answer for this, is how they're defining teachers, period, because it sort of splits out certain levels of teaching, which is going to be a problem for every school district. You already said that we could watch this today, because that was one of my questions. Was their meeting going to be, available to the public? I knew it would be an open meeting. I just didn't know how we could access it.
It's today at 1 p.m.
If you have a link for it, if you could put it in the chat or something, that would be greatly appreciated. And I think the only other thing I had is a concern that isn't going to be able to be addressed by them because it's the way it was set up. But everybody's creating a plan. We created an ESSER plan. The state board is looking into creating a plan they want us to respond to. The AIB is creating a third plan. It seems to me there needs to be some coordination, or all we're doing is spending our time developing plans. And we need to be about the business of teaching and learning, not to say that doesn't include a plan, but we already have a plan. So I don't know if there's any consideration about being able to incorporate some of those aspects into what they're doing so that we're not constantly having to take so much time doing that kind of activity. Just a thought, since you're going to be the liaison with them.
Those are really great comments. And first, I just want to say that I think that the strategic plan, our programs, our initiatives, many of them are very closely aligned with meeting the requirements of the blueprint plan. So I think we're in a good place as far as that's concerned. But how these various requirements are going to align with the blueprint that are already in place, it continues to be a question. I know for early childhood, the state has a sort of a transitional plan that will move us from pre-K state funding to these transitional preschool development grants, and then eventually on to just blueprint funding. But each year, it makes some significant changes in what those requirements are going to be. And so that can be difficult for folks to navigate across the state, as well as for our community partners. So that point has been noted at the other meetings as well. I think, thank you. Someone just put into the chat
I just want to
about
say,
the General Assembly, because the AIB meeting will be televised today at 1 p.m.
I just want to say we're glad to have you so that we can communicate with one person about this, because it's a very ambitious plan, and it's going to be a challenge for us, and I'm sure for every district to implement. So thank you, and that's all of my questions.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and we'll be seeing a lot of you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Judy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm still, I'm really glad that Janine is back, because she did a fabulous job when she was here with us before in elementary education and being in charge. I have a question about farms. Somebody at the state, MSDE, I think, told us not to use farms when we're talking about the insufficiency of income for our students. So we need something more definitive than that, because if we can't use farms, what should we be using? And I have a question about our focus schools. Many of them were Title I schools, but then because of this new definition, we had to pull them out of that, and we're still giving them extra assistance. So if we could have a clarification on that, it would be really helpful. And this is just something I'm grousing about, the national board certification. I just don't understand why that is so important. I think subject matter degrees are better, because we've got kids that can't read. We've got kids that can't do math. We need to have people in their subject area figuring out how to do this better for their students. That's just me. But thank you for listening.
Thank you. And I think in Dr. Kerwin's remarks, some of what he said was that they did a gap analysis, a 2-year gap analysis, benchmarking against the state of Massachusetts. And they looked at all of the systems and structures that were in place in Massachusetts, which was a high performing school system. And then for each area that there was not something comparable in Maryland, they implemented these, sort of put these pieces into the blueprint plan. And so in his mind, and in the mind of the commission and the work, they felt that the higher the credential of the teacher, that there would be greater outcomes for the students, and then that was similar to what was in place in Massachusetts. And so they used the National Board Certified as sort of a benchmark for the quality for teachers. They also felt that the prestige of the teacher was much higher in the state of Massachusetts, perhaps comparable to doctors and attorneys and others, because of these additional credentials. So that's why they sort of focused on nationally board certified. But
that's all very nice.
There are some different definitions in there. Mm-hmm.
It's all very nice, but if the students are not doing better, I don't buy it.
Right.
So I just want to say, I, for one, am incredibly excited to see the blueprint really getting rolling, as somebody who followed the Kerwin Commission's work very closely and the evidence base that they use to formulate their recommendations. I just see the opportunity for really transformational change to benefit students. So I'm looking forward to hearing how we, the devil's in the details, and now it's time to roll up the sleeves, how's it going to work? And I did want to thank Ms. Wolf for her comment, looking at CTE teachers and where they fall into this. And so just one question I would ask you to maybe follow along or ask when you have the opportunity would be, when I look at slide 5, elevating teachers and leaders, and they list this level 1, level 2, level 3. To my mind, I'd like clarification to ensure that when they say masters in a subject would make a teacher eligible for level 3, that includes, CTE instructors who very often do have master's and higher preparation in their areas of professional expertise, whether that's technology, whether that's medicine, whether that's, architecture and graphic design. So I would like to know that qualification, and as Dr. Daka was saying, subject matter, graduate level preparation is what they're envisioning, or at least part of what they're envisioning in this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll try to get as much additional clarification on that as I can.
Yeah, and that is all I have. Does anybody else have any questions? I see we are over. Anything else?
I just had a quick thing. I know we're going to do legislative audit update at the next meeting, but I think you alluded in the beginning that we might consider doing an interim meeting. The only reason I'm suggesting that is because the timing, we're going to get the discussion notes from the legislative audit within the next month, and then we're going to turn around and do a management responses, which I would like the Fiscal Management Committee's input on those our responses. So that might be before February is all I'm suggesting.
Yeah, I'm looking at the calendar and everything, all the balls in the air with Blueprint, with other things, with the audit. And I'm thinking that, yeah, probably. And now that we know this, the AIB has this February 15th deadline. I'm thinking, yeah, probably late January, but let's coordinate, because we want to make sure that we meet in a way that suits the needs that you have for the audit, the state audit reports and your responses. So
thank you.
Anything else? And again, I apologize for skipping over that item. Anything else before we conclude? And some of us, take a quick break before we click that link at 1 o'clock to watch. Okay, thank you all again very, very much for all of this information, all of the hard work. And again, it just shows that the Fiscal Management Committee is the sexiest committee that the board has. Thanks, everybody. And that's it for today.